Hello, my name is Andre Ward, and I'm the Associate Vice President of the David Rothenberg Center for Public Policy. Welcome to Both Sides of the Bars, a discussion-driven show that examines the legal system from various perspectives, including people most impacted by the criminal legal system. We discuss critical questions about how the current system works, its intersections with social justice, and highlight the efforts that are being made to improve the lives of everyone that is affected by it. We ask you, the viewers, to spread the word about both sides of the bars and share comments with us on Twitter at the Fortune SOC. So today we have a really lively discussion and also a really interesting topic that we want to discuss as it relates to criminal legal reform issues in New York State, but more broadly, obviously nationally. We're talking about today is technical parole violations. And today I have several guests with us from different organizations that are working on ending the kind of parole and probation practices that negatively impact people that have some criminal legal history in some way and on parole and probation. Currently, we talk about in New York State, and I'm sure this applies nationally as well, there are more people that are reincarcerated for technical parole violations, which could be a curfew, like not coming in at a certain time, or if your curfew is at 10 o'clock, you come in at 5 after 10, you're violated for parole, which is considered a technical parole violation. Someone not calling their parole officer. Someone may have some issues with alcohol use, which is more of where treatment is needed rather than incarceration. All these things are associated with technical parole violations, and it's something that needs to be addressed. Currently, New York State in particular reincarcerates more people for technical parole violations than any state in the country, except for Chicago, Illinois. And I'll say that again, New York State reincarcerates more people for technical parole violations than any other state in the nation, except Illinois. And this is something that has been a huge issue and something that advocates, some of whom are on this call, have been lifting up and amplifying for so long to make sure that this is changed. Some other data to look at too, when we talk about these parole violations, right? In New York State, there were in 2016, 6,300 people were sent back to prison for technical parole violations. And of that 6,300 or so, that represents like 65% of the New York State population. That's a lot of people, just a lot of people that are returned back to prison for technical parole violations. And of those, that 65%, only 14 of them had new offenses. So clearly there is a challenge with the parole system and probation system, and it's broken. So today I have joined with me some leaders from various organizations. I have Emily Napier, who is from the organization Unchanged. I have Donna Hilton, who is from A Little Piece of Light. She serves as the CEO and the executive director there. Emily serves in the executive capacity there at Unchained. And then I have Della Smith, who has also joined us from the Catal Center for Health, Equity, and Justice. Leaders, colleagues, thank you so much for joining us here at Both Sides of the Bars. How's everyone feeling today?
Fine, thank you.
So I want to get right into it. Right? Kind of hear about what each of your organizations do, and then we want to segue into the work that each of your organizations are doing around ending these kind of parole practices that are negatively impacting people in New York State, but also impacts people nationally. And I'll start with you, Emily. Talk to us about Unchained. What does it do, and your role in work in it?
Yeah, thanks, Andre. It's great to be here, especially with my esteemed colleagues, Donna and Della. So Unchained is an organization that's based up in Syracuse, New York. So we're about 4 hours north of New York City, right in the middle of New York State. And we have a mission to broadly dismantle the carceral state. So that's all these different facets of our criminal legal system, you know, from policing all the way to parole when people come home from prison, right? The whole spectrum of the carceral state. What's unique about Unchained, in addition to being based in upstate New York, is that we are co-led by myself and my husband, Derek Singletary, who is currently in state prison. And we lead the organization together with him on the inside and me out here, because we, you know, just have a fundamental belief that the people who have survived and are surviving the system are the ones who know best what the problems are and what we need to do to address that. You know, we have a lot of formerly incarcerated people leading in the movement now, which has been a major shift over the past couple of decades, which is a huge, important shift to have taken on in the movement. But what we're really trying to do is bring currently incarcerated people into this movement as well, which, as you can imagine, is difficult to do. There's a lot of logistical challenges with that. And I know Donna can speak to all of that as well, in terms of what A Little Piece of Light is doing. So that's broadly what we do at Unchained, and we co-lead this Less is More campaign to overhaul the way parole functions with A Little Piece of Light and with Catal.
And we want to get into that too, right? This campaign, right, on less is more. I want to get into the weeds with that a little bit. I want to shift, obviously, to you, Donna Hilton. Work that you're doing now, right? You've been around for many, many years doing this work. Now you are heading A Little Piece of Light. Talk to our listening audience about what is A Little Piece of Light.
Oh, hi, everyone. Thanks again for having this conversation with us, Andre. So A Little Piece of Light. A Little Piece of Light was created out of my walk and the walk of so many other women and girls who have been impacted by the criminal legal system, abuse, violence, and trauma. So our primary focus are women and girls who have been impacted by those things. And so we know the vast majority of women and girls, let's say, in the system, in the criminal legal system, who are incarcerated, have that in their, you know, that is usually a significant factor into what led them into prison in some capacity, right? Or just formed their life. And so, so that's that. So the work that, again, like what Emily was saying, that A Little Piece of Light is co-leading the Less is More campaign. One of the things that we've been able to do was focus on pregnant women during this time of COVID, right? And get some stuff done around that, right? We were instrumental in getting 7 women out of the system during this time. Unfortunately, 1 went back, right? And that 1 went back because it was a technical violation. Because unfortunately, this young woman has a substance abuse issue, and so there's nothing else to respond to it. There's no other way to respond to her issues and her illness. It's, you know, it's a disease, right? But to incarcerate it. And so this is what we're seeing across the board. And to your point, just during this time, the governor had told the world that they were going to release roughly 1,100 people who fell under that category, right? Basically of being on parole or whatever. And I think we got like 700 and change, 740 something that were released. Out of that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Emily, but I believe that out of that, 400 and almost 500 went back for technical violations. So again, this argument, this campaign is very important because we see not just during this time of COVID, but this is what's really brought it to light, right? The cruel nature of parole itself, where you have people that are not committing crimes and they might not have any other issues, but they're poor. That's great. Poverty is a crime, right? Mental health, drug addiction, or whatever. You know, there are many hurdles that those of us who have been on parole face. And so you reincarcerate the person, but you don't put any, you know, you don't utilize whatever systems might be in place or create any systems, you know, to address that. And so this is some of the work that we focus on with A Little Piece of Light, and we come from it from the aspect of women. And we are fortunate enough to have some women on the inside who help with this in the leadership capacity as well. We're doing a decades worth of time, and understand the system from the inside, like obviously I do, but also who have been reincarcerated because of these issues, not crimes.
Right. Absolutely. And Donna, you speak of that, right? You can't, our country can't incarcerate themselves out of addressing substance use or alcohol use issues, right? You can't do a mental health issue. You can't just put people away and think that's going to go away, right? There has to be something else in place. And so that's a good point you raised. And obviously being able to respond to the needs of women who are incarcerated and also have had the experience of technical violations is something obviously that's really important. A Little Piece of Light is doing, and it's timely because especially this is breast cancer awareness month as well, right? I think it's also critical in that work. And I want to shift to Della now, and Della obviously is a representative at the Catal Center for Health, Equity, and Justice. And Della, talk to our listening audience about the work that you're doing there with Catal and what it does, and then we're going to circle back into this campaign on Less is More. Della, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Well, I am a member of Catal, and Catal is a community-based organization, and we have three main goals. Our first goal, we want to end mass incarceration and mass criminalization and the war on drugs. And our second goal is developing leadership and the organizing capacity of our neighborhood residents and to drive about change, because we want change in our communities. And the third goal of the organization is advancing evidence-based solutions to achieve healthier, safer, and more equitable communities for all of our residents. And we achieve our goals through community organizing as a practice. To the point, I got involved with Catal based on someone coming to a senior center. So as a senior, you're never too late to become educated. And as you know, education is knowledge and power. So that's how I got involved with Catal. And I'm proud to be a member for these past 2 years, because it is self-evident that if we give people the tools and the information that they need, that hopefully we can do better and bring about the positive changes that we want to see throughout our community and for all of our residents.
Absolutely. And thank you for that, Della, too. And, when we're talking about this issue of technical parole violations and the need to overhaul that kind of practice, this is just not state, obviously, based, right, issue. This issue has national implications, right? So whatever state you're in, right, if you're from New York all the way to Florida, right, each state, obviously, although it's its own fiefdom to some degree, has these same mechanisms, right, in dealing with people on parole. And if there are 2.3 million people approximately that are incarcerated or have had some justice involvement in this country, right, we would say close to maybe over 500,000 or so are under some kind of community supervision or so. And that obviously has to be changed. Which leads me to talk to you, Emily, now. The Less is More campaign, explain to our listening audience, what is that? What is the Less is More campaign? What does it seek to do?
Sure. So our organizations drafted this bill with input from currently and formerly incarcerated people, people who are on parole, family members of people who are on parole. And we put together a bill that would do three main things, really. So the first thing is that it would, for most technical violations, eliminate incarceration as a sanction. So you would not go back to jail for those technical violations that you talked about at the beginning, Andre, those things like curfew, not calling your parole officer, an addiction issue, things that are not crimes, right? They're just part of the conditions that parole puts on you. There are a few of those technical violations under the bill that could potentially still result in incarceration, but it would never be for more than 30 days at a time. Whereas right now, it's very common for people to get a year or even a 2-year hit on a parole violation. And what I mean by that is they go back to jail, back to state prison for a year or even 2 years. And that's happening routinely. Under less is more, it would be no more than 30 days. The second thing that the bill does is it really changes the whole process of being accused of a technical violation, and it gives people much stronger due process rights. So right now, if your parole officer accuses you of a parole violation, what happens is they just handcuff you right then and there. It might be at your house, it might be at the parole office when you go in to report to your PO. They handcuff you right then and there and take you directly to jail. You do not get an arraignment in front of a judge like you do if you're accused of a regular crime. There's no opportunity for bail. You just sit in jail while your hearings are pending, which can take up to 90 days and sometimes even longer, depending on if the state is dragging their feet. And at no point during those 90 days do you have an opportunity for bail or ROR or anything like that, like you would if you were accused of an actual crime. So under less is more, that practice would stop. If you're accused of a technical parole violation, what you would be issued what we call a notice of violation, which is essentially an appearance ticket telling you to show up to court for a hearing on this accusation of this violation. No more going to jail automatically and having your life disrupted for up to 3 months.
Not just disrupted, Emily, but also put at extreme risk, especially during COVID-19.
During COVID, absolutely. We're talking about an accusation of a non-criminal behavior that could turn into a death sentence. That's a very real possibility at this moment that we're living in. And, for example, the first 2 people to die from COVID that they contracted at Rikers Island were there for technical violations of parole. So we saw that become a horrific reality, that these 2 gentlemen were at Rikers Island for things that were not even crimes and ended up dying as a result because of this pandemic. We have to put a stop to that. It's an absurd practice even in normal times, and it's a deadly practice in this moment that we're living in right now. And then very quickly, the third thing that the bill would do is it establishes this concept of earned time credits, which some people call the 30 for 30. And essentially that means if you are violation free for 30 days, you receive 30 days off your time under supervision.
And that's interesting, Emily, that you bring this up. This 30-30 rule is almost like, the more time you spend, the less time you have to do on parole, right? It'll actually be off at some point. I'm made to reflect on an article I just read about a Michigan governor who has just signed into legislation the Clean Slate Act, which will obviously allow people to sentences. If you have a felony, it can be expunged after like 10 years. If you have misdemeanors, those things will be expunged, which is really interesting. I'll get that article to you. But it's a Michigan governor that just signed legislation into law called the Clean Slate bills just Monday. But Don, I want to get to you, right? As someone who is a leader in the space, leading an organization that's focused specifically with women, how important was it that people who've had justice involvement and formerly incarcerated inform the bill around less is more?
Yeah, thanks for that. So I just wanted to say something to what you just said as well. I, as a person who has life on the back of my sentence, so that means I've served life, had an opportunity to get off of parole within a certain amount of time because there's a provision for that. But those of my peers who do not have life on the back of their sentence have no provision at all, right? And so I think we need to be clear about that. Like, people who don't have life are still on parole, and I who had life and came out after they've been out, there's quite a few are still on parole, right? And so this is one thing that we want to address with less is more. And so to answer your question, why is it important? It's important for our voices. It's we understand it. It's our walk. right? I mean, we have so many other people who take our stories and use it for whatever research, for whatever it is, but then it's third parties, fourth party, people, however many other parties, right? And so it gets lost. The actual, I mean, it becomes less tangible, right? You have to hear it from us. It has to take a person who's walked the walk to tell you what it's like, what it feels like, what it smells like, what happens. What happens after the cuffs come off? Not many people outside of us can respond to that. You know what I mean? What's the procedure? Like we all remember set it off, right? What's the procedure when there's a gun to you? So what's the procedure after the cuffs are off? What's the procedure after when you are facing, you know, your what's the ALS hearing, right? And so to not be violated, you know, what happens or what doesn't happen? Those things that need to be in place that are probably not in place, haven't been, because there are no checks and balances within the parole situation, you know, parole system. There just aren't any checks and balances. This is like just free reign, like what we see right now. We have so many institutions that have been created that have no oversight. And so they do whatever they want to do and do it to whoever they want to do it to. And that's why you see a large population of Black people, Black and brown people. Let's be clear, there's really no brown people, Black people, right, in the system. They know daggone well who they want to target, as much as we hate that word, but we're targets. And who they want, you know, who they want to criminalize. It starts, we look at the school to prison pipeline, foster care to prison pipeline. We see so many things. There have been so many things created, right? To criminalize and to penalize and to just incarcerate whole communities of people. And this is just another way, an extension of it. When does it end? When does it end? So you have to hear our walk, you have to hear our journey and experience with this to understand. So that's why it's very important. Very important. We can't miss anything here. We can't. Our
You know, it's
lives are
really,
really on a line.
you know, it's interesting too, you bring it up, Donna, because I mean, when we're talking about this idea of parole, technical parole violations, right? The decisions are obviously arbitrary and capricious, right? But just these arbitrary and capricious decisions that are made, there's like a relationship between that parole and the parole hearing
But they
itself.
also make up stuff, and it's been in my experience. They also make up stuff in the moment. There's one woman I know I met when I was working with Exodus and doing stuff, working with parole. And I saw this woman who's been out of prison many years before I got out, and she was at parole. And so I was, you know, I talked to her, and then she said her parole officer, who, you know, you go through so many, keeps pushing her date of release off of parole back and back and back because they're not satisfied with her mental health treatment. Basically, what she's taking, she should be taking some. I mean, like, where do you draw the line at? You're keeping this woman in the system, wasting money, wasting time, knowing full well that is not even your responsibility. That has nothing to do with you. And because you don't like it, I just had somebody, I have to say this is so important. Have somebody that I kind of, our organization helped save from going back to prison by giving her a job, right? Because she's on work release. The counsel for work release, because it's so important, because parole officers do the same thing, in the same mindset, said to her, and then she got that other job, oh, you're just making a little less than I am, with a nasty attitude, pissed off, because that woman is making almost as much money as she is, and she's on basically parole. You get what I'm saying? But you want to violate her because you're angry about that. That really happens.
You know, in our closing moments, unfortunately, how can people get in contact with each of your organizations, support the Less is More campaign? I'll start with you, Della. How can people get in contact with Katal, and what can they do to support the Less is More campaign?
Well, they can certainly support us by spreading the word, but in terms of contacting the organization, they can contact us. It's at katalcenter.org. They can get information at the katalcenter.org. And also we have a phone number, 646-875-8822. And we just want to make sure that all of our citizens are represented, because too often with the disparities, so many of us were missing the mark. And we just want to make sure that all of us are doing our part to get the information out, whatever is needed to help many of the families, many of the parolees. That's our mission. You know, it takes a village. All of us have to do this for the sake of the survival of all of our communities, not just for some of us, but for all of us.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Emily, obviously, how can people get in contact with Unchained? How can they support the campaign?
Thanks. Yeah, so our website at Unchained is www.weareunchained.org. And we're on social media at Unchained Now. And I'll also mention that the campaign itself has a website, which is www.lessismoreny.org, NY like New York. So if you go to www.lessismoreny.org, you'll find all kinds of resources like fact sheets, press releases. You'll find a tool to contact legislators and tell them you support the bill. And you'll also find ways to get in contact with all of us on that website.
Donna, how can folk get in contact with Less is More? I mean, a little piece of light, which starts with an L, like Less is More.
Well, just like Emily said, you could see the campaign co-leaders on the Qatar website, but also they could reach out to our website, a little piece of light.net. I think it's still .net right now, a little piece of light.net. We also are on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, and Donna Hilton. So you could just, it's easy to find us. And we have our grand opening of our office in Brooklyn coming up this Friday. And so everyone here is invited, right? And so, yeah, we're grand openings from 2 to 6. And so we'll have that space in Brooklyn, and all are welcome.
Donna, Della, Emily, thank you so much for joining us today here at Both Sides of the Bars. My name is Andre Ward. On behalf of the Fortune Society, we thank all of you as viewers from each state, each city, for joining us here at Both Sides of the Bars today to talk about technical parole violations and the Less is More campaign. We will see you next month. As always, be safe and remain well. Have a good day.